Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brittany Dufilly. I'm the Educational and Outreach Coordinator here at Verteks. Today we have Mike Dufilly, and he's going to be going over Mitel's Connect call group tips and tricks. So with that, Mike, I'm going to let you go ahead and kick it off and share your presentation.
Thanks, Brittany. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Wanted to do another one of these, kind of a little bit deeper look at a specifically requested feature for us on the PBX end of things, which was our call groups, or basically hunt groups and work groups, the things we can use to get calls routed to multiple extensions at a time. This will just be focused on what we can do with the PBX. So obviously we do have some other series to talk about contact center. That would be kind of a third type of group we could do, but this is just what we can do with the built-in PBX. And that's going to be primarily hunt groups and work groups. Those are our two main programming objects that we can use to get calls to multiple users. So a brief kind of summary of the differences between them, or why we might want to use one versus the other. So a hunt group is really our simplest type of group. It's a group that we can use without call queuing. You can think of it as almost being kind of analogous to the kind of lines on a phone, right? If a call comes into a hunt group, it's just going to ring on someone's button on their phone. If a second call comes into a hunt group, it's going to ring down on that second line appearance, the second button. They won't queue calls. They do have limited call distribution options we'll look at here in a second, but I can really just send a call to a list of users kind of top down, or I can ring everyone simultaneously. The membership of a hunt group is completely controlled by the PBX administrator. So we have to go into Director, we have to manually edit those group memberships, log people in and out of it if we want to change membership. Those are generally static and fixed and controlled by the admin. And finally, we do have kind of limited reporting options of the hunt group. It's a very basic sort of call control entity. So we can't get statistics for kind of service levels or how long it's taking calls to be answered. A few things we can gather, but some of the statistics that you'd want to see with maybe a queued group are not going to be there with a hunt group. So hunt groups are basic. Our better option, or next better option, is work groups. So that builds on the functionality that we have with the hunt groups with call queuing primarily as a feature if we're talking about using a work group for calling. They do have advanced call distribution options. So aside from kind of a top-down fixed list, we can use, again, that same simultaneous option, but we can also use what we call round-robin call distribution, where we're a little more fair on where we originate the call. You know, we won't send the call to the same person over and over first. And then the most fair option, least idle call routing, which will just send the call to the agent who's been idle the longest, or longest idle call routing, excuse me. And then finally, membership can be user controlled with a work group. So with some licensing we'll look at here in a minute, we can allow our agents to log themselves in and out of a work group with the license for the Connect client to do that. And then also we have a lot more advanced reporting associated with the work groups. So because we can use call queuing, we're able to monitor how long people are waiting in the queue, how long it's taking calls to get answered, and get some better reports on the service level of our queue there. So I want to look kind of a little more in depth at each of these, and we'll show you how to program them in Director, some of the things we can do with them. And we'll start out with our first one here, our hunt group. So kind of the first thing to know about these is that we configure these on our physical or virtual phone switches. They're not tied to the server, so that means that they're kind of our most survivable call group option. They'll continue to function even if the servers are down in the PBX environment. That does make them very useful as sort of backup extensions for a lot of things in the system if we're wanting to make sure that we can get a call to a group of users, and even if kind of really most of the system is down, we can use hunt groups for that, and they're best suited for that kind of a job. Again, they don't do any kind of call queuing, so you can think of them as kind of having the call stack like we have with a phone, where maybe you can handle 4 calls at a time or 8 calls at a time. Hunt groups are similar. They can handle a certain number of calls at a time and distribute those calls to the members of that group. But once you get past that call stack limit, the next caller is going to get a busy signal if those calls are still on the hunt group. So no queuing there. Again, those limited distribution options, the top down, which really is top down, it's a fixed order where it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of all the time. The first person in that list is going to get all the calls before they move on to the next person. And then we can do a simultaneous ring also. And in that case, whoever answers the call first gets the call. We're a little limited on the kind of schedules we can use with hunt groups. We can only use on hours and holiday schedules with these. We're not able to use the custom schedule type with a hunt group. Something to keep in mind if you want to use that with this. Of course, we can route inbound numbers to them directly, so we can use DID or DNS routing to get calls to them. And one little known feature, they can manually be made busy. There are a few cases where we'll use this as a trick to perform some kind of function on the system we wouldn't otherwise be able to do to manually change a call route. But you can dial *18 and the hunt group extension from a phone on the system, and with the appropriate permissions, you can actually busy out a hunt group and redirect its calls to its busy destination, whatever that's set to. Some limits with hunt groups, and this is where we in the past would sometimes run into problems with these operating correctly. For a long time, we didn't have the best guidance from ShoreTel really before Mitel's acquisition about what the limits were for some of these hunt groups, and you could easily program yourself into a problem with your calls because the system wouldn't let you know that these limits were here. But these are the recommendations for hunt group sizing from Mitel, and again, because this runs on our physical hardware, some of these limitations are different depending on what kind of hardware we have. So, for instance, an SG series switch will only support a maximum of 8 total hunt groups on that switch, with only 16 total members across all of those hunt groups. So it's very, very limited capacity for hunt groups on an SG series switch. And in fact, they're no longer recommended to be used to host hunt groups anymore. We'll usually want to move those to either an ST switch or preferably a virtual switch. Similarly, the ST switches, that's newer hardware, a little more beefy CPU and memory, they can actually handle up to 24 hunt groups per switch with up to 16 members per group. And we don't recommend we set up hunt groups on those if we have a virtual phone switch available, but they do have a higher capacity for hunt groups than the SG switches do. And then finally, for the virtual switches, which is really where we recommend placing hunt groups on systems now, they have similar stats to the ST switches, so 24 maximum hunt groups per switch, 16 members per group. Realistically, you can assign that virtual switch even more resources to go past even some of these limitations. Really, what's important with hunt groups is a special calculation we can do that determines the real-time load on a switch, which will run if we suspect that the switch is overloaded or having some trouble. But with a virtual switch, because we can give it more resources than a physical switch even would have, we can exceed some of these limits safely with these switches. And this is the recommendation for hunt groups, is to actually have dedicated virtual phone switches whose only job is to host these hunt groups, and not even to host phones, just a dedicated hunt group virtual switch. So to show you really quick in Director how we'll configure our hunt groups, or some of the options we have here, I'm going to go ahead and get logged into our own environment here. There we are. All right, so from here in Director, if I click on our orange icon for administration, we'll find both types of groups under the Features section. And Hunt Groups is hidden a little bit. We'll actually find that under the Call Control section here under Features. kind of a legacy of the way that this menu was built for us back before Connect in 14.2 and previous versions. But hunt groups we'll find under the call control section. And the kind of things we can configure on them are limited, just like we talked about here. I'll just use the one we're looking at here as an example, bottom part of my screen. Obviously, we can give it a name in the system, an extension, a backup extension. And in case you're ever curious, those backup extensions usually will use a hunt group as a destination for those. But those are extensions where if there's a failure of the system that would ordinarily host this extension, the system will try to reroute those calls to a device that it can reach. So for a hunt group, usually that would be a phone, potentially another hunt group. But when we look at work groups, we'll usually use a hunt group as the backup extension for a work group to provide some redundancy. Of course, we can use our DIDs here on the hunt group as well for inbound call routing. We have options to include them in the system dial by name directory. So this is really specific for just the dial by name directory that you would get access to through the auto attendant. This will include or remove this extension from that dial by name directory. If I wanted to hide this hunt group extension from my internal phone directory, you'd want to use the make extension private option to do that. These hunt groups do live on a switch here, so you would select a particular switch to host this hunt group from my available switches in the drop-down here. The hunt groups also has a call stack, so this is the simultaneous number of calls that the hunt group can handle at a single time. You'll see it can go from 1 to 16. Generally speaking, a hunt group cannot exceed that. There are cases where you can configure the hunt group to forward calls to other devices to get 16 more calls, or maybe send it to another hunt group with 16 more people. But generally speaking, you're only going to be able to handle a maximum of 16 calls in a hunt group simultaneously. Our distribution pattern, again, the only options we have here are top-down and simultaneous. We can choose the number of rings per member, so that would obviously make sense in a top-down scenario, where we might want to give, for instance, maybe 2 or 3 rings per member, and then the no answer number of rings. The maximum one we'll want to set there is usually going to be the number of rings per member times the number of members. So if I had a 2-person group, 6 would be kind of the right choice here, usually. We do have some checkboxes to control whether or not a particular member will receive a call. So the first one here, call member when forwarding all calls. Generally speaking, hunt groups do not respect a user's call handling mode or availability state settings. So even if they are set to in a meeting or out of office, if this were to be checked, this call member when forwarding all calls, then that would allow these hunt group calls to bypass even their availability state settings. Generally, this is something that's going to be unchecked unless this is a very high priority hunt group. Similarly, we can choose to skip a member if they're already on a call. Again, so we don't do any call queuing, but if a member of a hunt group happens to already be on a call, we can choose whether or not we want to send that call to them as kind of a second call or third call, depending on how busy they might be. Depending on the situation, we may or may not use the skip member option. Some cases, like for instance, like an operator hunt group, we may want additional calls to be able to present themselves on an operator's phone so they can switch between them. In that case, we would uncheck the skip member, but generally you can check the skip member if you don't want to present a call to a user who's already busy. If everyone who's a member of the hunt group is busy and this is checked, then the call is going to go straight to basically the busy destination, which is actually this first one here under this checkbox, this call stack full destination. This will be the destination of any calls to the hunt group if its call stack is full, or if all the members are busy because they're already on calls, and we have this skip member if already on a call checked. Similarly, the no answer destination would come into play if our no answer number of rings is exhausted. And then that call will go to this destination. You'll notice that both of these are blank by default. By default, hunt group will just simply play a busy signal if the maximum number of calls in the call stack is reached. Also, the no answer is blank, so by default, a hunt group will simply continue to ring its members until the call is answered. Depending on the situation, that may or may not be what you want to have happen, but it is a little unique in that we can configure calls to, hunt groups can be configured to allow calls to ring indefinitely on them, which is kind of something that's a little hard to do otherwise in the system. We do support an off hours or holiday destination, a single one that's shared between both of these schedules. So again, we don't support the custom schedule mode here at all. We can basically do kind of an on hours, off hours schedule with a single destination for rerouting calls if the hunt group is closed. Also, again, I kind of mentioned it, these hunt groups can be manually made busy by an administrator. So here in Director, if I go to our status and maintenance section here, we can actually go to the switch that hosts the hunt group under the appliances section. In our case, they're all on our vPhone switch here. And on its status page, you'll actually see there is a section here for hunt groups. It's something we very rarely do. But from here, I can actually go into a hunt group and apply a busy status to it. So that would make all the calls to this particular hunt group go to its no answer or busy destination if there's one set. If there isn't one set, it'll just provide a busy signal to anyone who calls it. Again, something we do in a few unusual edge cases if we need to provide the ability to manually change or override the destination for a call in an emergency, usually. And usually the way this will be triggered is not through Director here, but instead by dialing *18 from a phone on the network, entering the hunt group extension, and then listening to the prompts. I believe it'll prompt you to make the hunt group busy. You have to confirm that before it will actually place the hunt group in a busy state. So a little bit of trivia there for hunt groups. All right. For the user experience with a hunt group call, they're going to appear just like a call almost directly to their extension. They can see if it is a hunt group call. However, the caller ID information and anything else will just be what would appear for a normal call. So nothing special from a user experience side. All right. Now our second and more powerful type of group is our workgroup. These live on servers, so they would have to be configured either on the HQ server, although probably not, that's not recommended, or a DVS server. They will stop functioning if the server is down or malfunctioning. They can be set up with a backup extension of a hunt group, though, which does help provide some functionality in cases where a server is down or some network connectivity was lost. But for the call queuing and everything else to work for them, everything's got to be working on the server that it's configured to use. Now, the main advantage of a workgroup is that it supports call queuing. So, if I have a workgroup that, let's say, has 2 agents, both of those agents are on a call, the third call comes in, whereas in a hunt group, I would have to send them a busy signal or provide another destination. With a workgroup, I can simply start playing music on hold to that caller and keep them in a call queue until one of my agents is available. While they're waiting in the queue, I can choose, what kind of music on hold they want to hear there. I can also play some messages to them while they're waiting. to provide some kind of auto attendant-like functionality to give them potentially an option to leave a message in a voicemail or transfer to another group if I wanted to provide that option. We do have more advanced call distribution options for the members of our group, our agents. So we do have our same two options we saw with the hunt group, the top-down and simultaneous options. We also have a couple of new ones, round robin, which is similar to top-down in that I have a list of agents that I want it to proceed through in an order. The difference being is that it changes the first person it sends the call to as it rotates through that list. So kind of if it was a 3-member group, a call comes in, it'll ring first to 1, then 2, then 3. The next call is going to ring to 2, then 3, then 1. Then the next call will be 3, then 1, then 2. And it'll move through that list of agents in that round robin fashion to be a little more fair. Our work groups can use all of our, excuse me. Sorry about that. Work groups can use all of our schedule types. So with the hunt groups we just looked at, they can only use kind of a on hours, off hours schedule or a holiday schedule. Work groups, we can use the custom schedule type as well as have a unique holiday destination that's not shared with our off hours destination. We can use, of course, our inbound routing options. And we do have, with some licensing enabled, the ability to manage some of our workgroup functionality through the Connect client, which we'll look at here in a minute. For that licensing, this is something that's tied to a per user license associated with the Connect client. And just to give you a rundown of what we can do with each license level. So really a pretty common way for us to use these workgroups is actually without any licensing. And in that kind of mode, the workgroups function basically like static hunt groups. We can still support call queuing, but everything is managed from director. So the PBX administrator has to control the agent membership, whether agents are logged in or out. Agents have no visibility into the queue to see what calls they're being presented. The system's just handling that for them automatically in the background. Now, with a workgroup agent user license, so this is something that's attached to the user, it gives their Connect client the ability to log in and out of that group manually. So the agent has the ability to log themselves in and out of the workgroup to choose whether or not they want to receive calls or not. And they're able to see the number of calls waiting in queue, and potentially, with the right permissions, even pull calls out of the queue. So in the Connect client, they can actually see a list of waiting calls, and then with the right permissions, even the ability to answer those calls directly out of the queue, out of order. Finally, there's an even more enhanced license, the Workgroup Supervisor license, that provides all the same agent functionality. So a supervisor can be an agent, and then adds the ability to manually control the schedule of the workgroup. So we can actually put it into those on hours, off hours, holiday custom modes manually from the supervisor station, as well as the supervisor can manually control the state of their member agents. So they have the ability to log an agent in and out of the group themselves if they forget to do it or need to manually adjust that for whatever reason. So again, to show you guys that in Director, back under our administrative section, here under Features, Workgroups have their own section, not under Call Control like Hunt Groups. And here in the Workgroup, we have a lot more options for handling these calls, obviously, because it's more powerful. Obviously, our same name extension, backup extension. As I mentioned, generally speaking, for a backup extension for a work group, it's recommended to set this up using a hunt group. You can actually set up a hunt group that has some of the same members or similar membership to the work group. And in case there's ever a problem with the server or the system, the work group can actually fail down to that hunt group and still provide, a way to get calls to people's phones. It won't have call queuing or the advanced features of the work group, but it will provide for a minimum level of functionality, at least in a kind of disaster scenario where things aren't working. We do have the same options to include or not this extension in the dial by name directory, or to hide it from the internal system directory with the make extension private. Workgroups do live on a server here, so we can choose what server this particular workgroup lives on. Again, the recommendation is generally to have this be on a DVS or a dedicated DVS, potentially, depending on how many workgroups you have in your environment, on a particular server here. Workgroups do support mailboxes. One of the most common reasons we'll set up a workgroup on a system is actually to use it as a shared mailbox, not actually to handle any calls. And for the purposes of this webinar, we're just talking about it from a call handling perspective, but another common reason to see a workgroup on a system is actually just to use it for its mailbox. On its call routing tab, we choose the options for how we want calls to be handled by the agents, right, for each of our different schedule modes. Primarily, our on hours tab is going to choose how we want this to behave normally when it's handling calls. Generally speaking, the most common option we have for our distribution is going to be longest idle. For a workgroup that's handling calls, most of the time you're going to have several agents, and they're going to be handling those calls in sort of a fair way, and the fairest way to distribute these calls is the longest idle. Call forward, and generally that's going to be no answer or busy, although if we did have a work group that, for instance, off hours always sent its calls to a particular extension or to a voicemail, we would use the always option. And then you'll see here we have some different options for busy and no answer, and really the one we use most often with these work groups is our queue option here. So if all of our agents are busy, or if for whatever reason, perhaps an agent walked away from their desk and didn't answer the phone, we can choose to queue these calls and hold on to them until an agent is available and ready to take the call. Similar sort of ring controls. So, if we do want to forward the call to voicemail or to another destination, how many rings per agent? And then another option here unique to our work group are if all of our agents are logged out, if that's a possibility, where do we want to send the call? We do have the option to queue it, although potentially it could sit in that queue for a long time if all the agents are logged out forever. So it's good to have somebody keeping an eye on a work group if you are going to be using these agent and supervisor features live. Additional options for voicemail, like you would see with a user account here. We do support all of the same functionality for a workgroup voicemail box that you would see with a user voicemail box. On the members tab, similar to a hunt group, this is where we would choose membership for the group. Workgroups are a little unique in that membership is assigned here, but an individual member can be logged in or logged out of the workgroup, depending on whether or not they're enabled to receive these calls. An administrator can set that here in Director by clicking on the user here on the Members tab. When you click on a particular user, you'll see it flew out to the right here, a place where I can select the agent state. Now, without a license, without a workgroup agent or workgroup supervisor license attached to my account, an administrator in Director is the only way to change this agent state, whether or not it's logged out or logged in and able to take calls. If I had a workgroup agent or workgroup supervisor license, I'll be able to change this agent state myself. But to do that from Director, I have to go here to the Members tab of the workgroup, click on the particular member, and change the agent state here on this flyout to the right. And finally, our queue handling tab is where we can make adjustments to the messaging that callers hear while they're waiting on hold in the queue for a work group. The functions here are basically the same as we have for an auto attendant. We have up to 5 steps here, step 1 through 5, that we can attach, that we can use to play messages to a caller while they're in the queue. You'll notice here by default, all of them are skipped except for step 5. So by default, there is only a step 5. And the only thing it's configured to do by default is to announce an estimated wait time every 60 seconds. And it won't actually send the call to another destination. If I wanted to play a message or give a caller an option to, for instance, transfer to another group or go to a voicemail while they were waiting, what I would need to do is enable one of these other 4 steps. So uncheck the skip the step box. Choose whether or not I want it to announce an estimated wait time. Most people uncheck this option for virtually in all cases. The wait time estimation that the work groups do is extremely unreliable. It doesn't use a very good average of calls, especially for small groups that don't receive a lot of calls. So it can announce some very wacky wait times compared to what you actually are experiencing, or kind of vice versa. It can announce some really small wait times when your wait times are long. So most people don't rely on this estimated wait time, but it is there. It works best with very busy work groups. So your mileage may vary if you check this off, and you get some wacky times, but it is available as an option. This time until next step is basically going to be, so it'll, when a call comes in, it enters the queue. It's going to follow everything here in step 1 immediately. So step 1 will happen immediately after the call enters the queue. And then it's going to wait 60 seconds until it proceeds with these other steps. And during that 60 seconds, callers will be hearing music. The other options that we have available here, and I'm just going to expand to this bottom section so we can see it a little bit better, are, again, the same things we could use with an auto attendant. So if I wanted to, for instance, right away give my callers an option to go to voicemail, I can simply choose the button I would like them to press, say, hey, let's transfer to extension. And for instance, if I have let's use our help desk as an example, press 1 here and hit save. And so now in this queue, I have to record a prompt here first. Once I record the prompt for this, which I do through this workgroup greeting control right underneath here, the step, I can record a prompt to say, thank you for continuing to hold. If you'd like to be transferred to our help desk right away, please press 1 now. Then they'll press 1 and get transferred to the help desk. These options are only available to the callers who are waiting in queue during the time that this prompt is playing for them in each of these steps. So just something to keep in mind, the ability for someone to hit 1 and get transferred to a destination isn't available for this entire 60-second period between step 1 and step 5 in this case. It would only be available to them during the time that the actual prompt is playing. So depending on what you're trying to accomplish with the queue handling here, you may want to record a longer or shorter actual prompt here so that the option is available for callers for a longer period of time. Now, in between these steps, again, for 60 seconds, once this prompt completes playing, if the person hasn't made a selection, they'll continue to stay in the queue. They'll hear the music on hold until the next step were to be triggered. So if I wanted to do a different step 2, I could uncheck the skip this step and now provide the same option or potentially a different option here with step 2. And again, I can use step 3 and step 4. Now, once I get past step 4, step 5 is a special case because after we get to step 5, this time until next step, it's basically just going to go back and repeat step 5 again. So the way this works, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 kind of indefinitely every 60 seconds in this case, where it'll repeat whatever I have programmed here for step 5. We do have options here on step 5 that are a little unique for this overflow interflow. So if I didn't want to keep repeating step 5 and wanted to send it to a different work group or another hunt group or something else at that point, we can use this overflow interflow option here at the bottom of step 5 to send these calls to another destination if they reach the end of the queue handling here. But ordinarily, a call would be kept in the queue indefinitely in a work group by default, or until it gets answered at least. The user experience for work groups, just want to show you my Connect client here. So I've got my Connect client set up here as a user without an extension, or sorry, without a license for a workgroup feature. Just to show you what you can see without that license, and this is going to be it by default, and really it's just going to be a screen showing you the voicemails associated with any workgroups that you're a member of. That feature doesn't require a license. Additionally, the icon next to my workgroup menu item here in the Connect client shows me the status of any workgroups I'm a member of, whether I'm logged in or logged out. Logged in is green here, logged out would be red. Because I don't have a license, I can't see which workgroups I'm a member of and which ones I'm logged in and out of. So this is kind of a little bit useless for me, but it will reflect the state of the workgroups I'm a member of, whether I'm logged in or logged out of them. And that's something controlled by the administrator, not by me. Now, if I were to upgrade myself, which I will do, to a workgroup agent license, we'll see that I get the ability, and that's through this access license drop down on my user account here. It's my, there we are. Connect client refreshes. You'll see I have a lot more options here now. So the first one is down here at the bottom of my workgroup screen. I now have the ability to log myself in and out of workgroups. I can't be logged in and out of individual workgroups. I can only be logged in and out of all of my workgroups or none of my workgroups. So if you're logged in, you're logged into all of them. And if you're logged out, you're logged out of all of them. That status I can change myself here with that workgroup agent license. I have the ability to control whether or not I receive audio alerts for workgroup calls. That's what this little bell icon does for me. As well as with this settings tab here, some configuration for audio and pop-up alerts if calls are piling up in the queue. This is something that an agent would set for themselves. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to turn these particular alerts on for everyone. But with this turned on, an agent can actually receive an audio or pop-up alert if the number of queued calls exceeds some variables we can set in Director. But the user has to turn this on manually in their Connect client. If there were any calls waiting in this, for instance, demo workgroup here, if I hit this show workgroup details, I'd actually be able to see the individual queued calls here. And then again, with a particular permission, I would be able even to pull individual queued calls out of the workgroup and answer them. Now, if I go ahead and upgrade myself to the supervisor agent license here, you'll actually see that superficially, this looks very much the same, except you'll notice I have a new wrap-up option here. So a supervisor has the ability to place themselves in and out of a wrap-up state, whereas an agent would not. And wrap-up is time between calls that we can configure in the workgroup. So it gives a caller or the agent a little bit of space in between individual calls to wrap up any, close out a ticket or type up some notes. And a supervisor can control that state manually. Additionally, if I hit my show workgroup details here, I have an agents tab, or I can control the status of my agents in the workgroup. So for instance, I'm logged in here. Oops, well, I can't log myself in. Steve's logged in here, but I can click the little workgroup icon and manually log agents in or out of the workgroup. And additionally, on this main screen, this little green icon next to the workgroup name is actually its schedule indicator. And with the workgroup supervisor account, I can click on that and manually set the schedule mode of the workgroup from my Connect client here. So that's a very powerful feature, actually, if we need to be able to manually control call routing for particular entities. We can actually buffer those through workgroups using the workgroup supervisor license and give people manual control over those, the call routing, kind of in a unique way. These features are also available with the operator license. So if on your system, if you wanted to kind of try these out, or you might have one user or two users who need to use them, if you do have any operator licenses available, these features are also enabled in that license class. The supervisor functions as well. Right. Finally, one thing to talk about, the workgroups do have limits, although they're much higher than the hunt group limits, but we can support up to 256 total workgroups per system image. So for an entire system, there can be a total of 256 workgroups. We can support up to a maximum of 300 members per workgroup, although that would be in a single workgroup because we can only support 300 agents max in a system image. So should only have 300 agents total in an active agents built on an entire system, distributed between one or more workgroups. And then also the simultaneous ring feature is limited to 16 members. I'm not sure if it'll actually let you program more than that. I think it will, but kind of your mileage may vary situation after 16. But I think that was all I had today to discuss about our two main types of groups. Hopefully it answered some of your questions about it. I know we had some particular questions about queue handling previously, but thank you all for your time this afternoon, and we'll open it up to any questions from the audience.
Yeah, fantastic, Mike. Thank you. We'll give everybody a few more minutes. If you do have any questions, go ahead and enter them in the questions or the chat window. And also, don't hesitate to reach out to us directly. This particular webinar was actually asked to be produced. So if you ever have something that you're having difficulty with, when Robert gives you a call to let you know about the webinars, don't hesitate to let him know, hey, I'd love for him to go through, this scenario with us so we can kind of see how it's fixed and what we can do differently. So please don't hesitate to do that. That's what we're here for. Still don't see any questions there. I will remind everybody, next month is going to be the special webinar. We're going to have some special guests from Bright Metrics, and they are going to be showing you their reporting systems and how you can use it for both the Connect system and also with the Enterprise Contact Center. And they do have some new things with like Ring Central, so if you have considered moving over to the cloud or anything like that, they do have some availability for that as well. but we will have one of their main guys, Brian Olstein. He will be sharing with us some new information on Bright Metrics. So thank you again, and everybody have a very nice day.